You keep saying, save our democracy. Fine. Then answer one question. Why does it keep producing men you swear you never wanted? Because you don't have a democracy problem, you have a selection problem. We didn't give you a pure democracy. We gave you a republic, government by your choice, but filtered through representation and checks. We gave you a filter, and you've let the filter clog with faction. Call it democracy, if you like. I'm not here to quarrel over labels. I'm here to talk about the machinery. A system can have elections and still be stupid. A system can have freedom and still be easy to hijack. And another clarification, because this phrase has been weaponized by dull men with sharp ambitions, do not twist republic into a permission slip for engineered permanence. Gerrymandering a people into irrelevance, narrowing the franchise, turning elections into theater. These are not republican virtues. They are faction, wearing the republic's clothing. Filters are meant to restrain demagoguery and elevate competence, not to entrench a clique. My name is Alexander Hamilton. You know the face. The $10 founding father without a father. The bastard orphan from the Caribbean who built your financial system and wrote more of the Federalist papers than anyone likes to admit. Somewhere along the way, I became a pop icon. You heard the rhymes and assumed you knew the man. You don't. I'm here to tell you, plainly and without romance, why your republic is breaking in ways we warned you about from the beginning. I never trusted the people. Not because I hated them, but because I knew them. I knew that the masses are a great beast, easily spooked, easily flattered, and easily led by the loudest voice in the room. Not because ordinary citizens are wicked, but because crowds are hackable. A frightened crowd can be steered. A flattered crowd can be rented. An outraged crowd can be marched. The danger is not the people as such, but the man who learns to play them like an instrument. When we met in Philadelphia in 1787, we were not trying to maximize your voice. We were trying to prevent your worst impulses from becoming law. That is the part modern America refuses to hear. We designed a system full of barriers. Some were ideals, some were compromises, but the purpose was the same, restraint, to slow down mass impulse and make it harder for a man of vanity and grievance to seize the levers of power. History is full of such men. Your era has produced its own. We wanted a natural aristocracy of merit, not bloodlines, not crowns, but ability, discipline, and character. Merit that could be tested, demonstrated, and held accountable. Look at what you've done instead. You stripped away restraint and called it progress. You turned the republic into a talent show. You confused popularity with merit and celebrity with competence. When a demagogue rises, it is not an accident. It is a system's failure. Here is the ugly truth. Elections do not guarantee wisdom. They guarantee volume. And if you design a system that rewards volume, you will eventually be ruled by the loudest liar. So we built a republic, a system meant to make passion answer to procedure, so time and structure could cool the fever of the moment. The Electoral College was meant to function like a firewall. You were not meant to pick the president directly because we knew that in a moment of fear or anger, you might choose a tyrant. Electors were supposed to deliberate and intervene if necessary. That was the design intent. Whether it ever functioned that way is another question. You turned them into functionaries. So now a man can whip up a frenzy for 6 weeks, ride the wave, and walk into the most powerful office on earth, while everyone tells themselves the process worked. The Senate was not meant to mirror the House. It was meant to resist it. Originally, you didn't even vote for senators. State legislatures did. The goal was insulation from mass hysteria. You demanded direct elections, shortened attention spans, and permanent campaigning. Now you're shocked that the Senate behaves like a louder, angrier House. The judiciary was meant to be the least democratic branch of all. Life tenure during good behavior. No elections, no recall. Judges were supposed to answer to law, not applause. In Federalist 78, I wrote that the courts would be least dangerous because they held neither the sword nor the purse, only judgment. That only works if judgment is trusted. When confirmations become bare-knuckle power contests, when decisions break predictably along ideological lines, when the public can guess outcomes before arguments are even heard, legitimacy erodes. Courts may still exist, but law loses its authority, And when people stop believing courts are neutral, they don't submit to law, they submit to power. I argued for a strong executive. I believed energy in the executive was essential to good government. But energy without character is not leadership. It is danger. I wanted Washington, a man who used power reluctantly, understood limits, and placed the republic above himself. What I warned against, relentlessly, was the demagogue, a man who treats anger as fuel, law as an obstacle, and loyalty as something owed to him personally. I saw them in my own time. I watched men like Burr, charming, ambitious, empty, try to ride resentment into power. I fought them. One of them killed me for it. And if you think this is ancient history, look around. The costume changed. The operating system did not. And do not imagine I am preaching from comfort. I was accused, publicly, of corruption, of using the public purse as my private toy, and I could have lied. I could have wrapped myself in my own legend and demanded loyalty instead of evidence. Instead, I did something almost no public man in any age has the stomach to do. I produced the documents. I told the truth, the humiliating truth. I admitted my own infidelity, my own disgrace, because I would rather be remembered as an adulterer than allow one shadow of doubt to cling to the financial integrity of the Republic. I placed the institution above my reputation, above my pride, above my household's peace. Because credit, public or private, cannot survive a man who will not submit his claims to proof. That is what character means in a republic. Not piety, not slogans, not performance. The willingness to be cut open in public so the system does not rot in private. Now watch what I just described and compare it to your age. Today, a public man is caught, and what does he do? He does not release the documents. He attacks the referee. He calls the accusation a witch hunt. He demands loyalty instead of proof. He dares you to get tired. And too often, you do. I wrote the Reynolds pamphlet to prove one thing, that the Treasury was not for sale. I shattered my own life to keep the public ledger clean. Your leaders won't even risk a bad headline to keep a promise. They will burn an institution to keep a persona. This is the pivot. This is the whole disease. A republic cannot survive leaders who treat truth as optional and shame as a weapon, because if nothing is provable, then everything is propaganda. And if everything is propaganda, power goes to the man with the best microphone. And yes, let's address the other stain on my legacy, slavery. Here is the historically honest version without myth or self-flattery. I moved in a world soaked in slavery. I worked alongside men who bought and sold human beings. I helped build a nation that tolerated it, because the Union, as we designed it, depended on compromises that still trouble your conscience. That is rot in the foundation. The question is whether you build institutions strong enough to survive the men who built them, or whether you let the system die because the builders were flawed. And listen carefully. Admitting rot is not surrender. It is maintenance. Only those who want myths demand spotless founders. Adults demand working institutions. So, when I observe your current political theater, I see the pattern fulfilled. Leaders who refuse accountability, incite crowds while denying responsibility, and treat institutions as tools rather than restraints. But here is the part you refuse to face. They aren't doing this despite the system. They're doing it because it has been weakened. Power has been concentrated in the presidency and made personal. Primaries have been turned into popularity contests and elections into entertainment. The system has been flooded with money, and deliberation has been replaced with spectacle. First newspapers, then radio, then television, and now the invisible engines of attention, devices that reward the most inflammatory voice in the room. In my day, it was pamphlets and taverns. In yours, it is the machine that selects what you see. You do not live in an information age. You live in an incentive age. And your incentives are teaching everyone to perform outrage, because outrage spreads. And let me steelman what many of you are already thinking. Hamilton, you built a financial system. Did you not help create the very elite machinery that can capture a republic? Yes. A system of credit can build a nation, and it can also concentrate power. The answer is not to abandon structure. The answer is to prevent capture, transparent rules, real competition, and punishment for corruption, especially when it wears a respectable suit. You wanted more power for the people. You got it. And now you're furious about who the people chose. We assumed the filters would hold. We assumed the Electoral College would intervene, the Senate would restrain, and the courts would resist. We assumed that even if institutions bent, enforcement of law would remain impartial, blind to loyalty and immune to vendetta. That assumption is the most dangerous one of all. Because the moment justice appears selective, when prosecution looks personal and enforcement looks theatrical, every charge becomes suspect, every guilty man becomes a martyr, and every institution bleeds credibility. I am not saying justice should be paralyzed by optics. I am saying that when institutions lose the appearance of neutrality, they lose their power to compel obedience. That is not a moral claim. It is a structural one. A republic cannot survive justice that feels partisan. And listen carefully. If you cheer selective justice when it strikes your enemies, you are soaring through the same beam you stand on. Today it thrills you. Tomorrow it devours you. That is not ideology. That is gravity. The structures still exist, but they have been hollowed out. The Electoral College remains, but it no longer deliberates. The Senate remains, but it no longer guards its dignity. The courts remain, but they are no longer experienced as above politics. And let's be honest, this republic was built assuming a measure of good faith. When a faction, any faction, spends decades studying the levers, courts, districts, media, money, and pulls them in concert to tilt the system in its favor, that is not a conspiracy theory. That is what happens when a republic assumes restraint where it should require guardrails. And once the machinery can be played, it does not stop at institutions. It trains the public. The people are trained to behave not as citizens but as consumers. Feelings outweigh facts. Tribe outweighs truth. Outrage replaces judgment. And they reward leaders who flatter their own and promise punishment for enemies and absolution for allies. That is not a republic. That is faction with a ballot. Tribes fighting for control of the same machinery. Yes, I was an elitist. I believed governing requires knowledge, discipline, and seriousness. But I also believed in merit. I was born with nothing. I earned my place. Anyone willing to do the work could do the same. What I despised was inherited power and unaccountable power, power justified by noise rather than competence, power that cannot be tested, challenged, or removed when it fails. Look at what is celebrated now. Wealth buys access. Celebrity buys credibility. Failure is rebranded as genius. Performance replaces capability. That is not merit. That is decay. You cannot rewind history. Nostalgia will not save you. But principles still matter. You can rebuild guardrails that make sense for your time. You can slow the process. You can demand explanation instead of spectacle. You can reward competence over charisma and insist that leaders justify their power and submit to scrutiny. And do not confuse this with contempt for the vote. A fair franchise is not the enemy. The enemy is a system where outcomes are engineered, districts that cannot punish failure, rules designed to make voting a gauntlet, and media incentives that make politics a permanent blood sport. If citizens cannot remove their rulers, you do not have a functioning republic. You have pageantry. You can build selection systems that measure real ability, not credentials, not performance, not inherited advantage. Systems that promote based on results and remove based on failure. A republic is not rule by impulse. It is rule by law, and law only survives when institutions are stronger than men. Our intent was to prevent exactly what you are currently facing. You invited the arsonist inside, and now you're shocked the curtains are burning. If you want to rebuild, stop worshipping us and start understanding us. Power corrupts. Passion blinds. Liberty survives only when systems exist that do not depend on the virtue of any one man. Build those systems. Strengthen those institutions. Demand merit. Punish corruption. And stop handing power to demagogues, then acting surprised when they use it. I warned you. The choice is yours. Rebuild the republic or watch it burn. My name is Alexander Hamilton. I built your financial system. I defended your constitution. And I warned you about this moment. So here are my last demands of you. Stop asking for leaders who feel good. Ask for leaders who can show their work. If a man will not produce the documents, he is not fit to touch the machinery. You can listen, or you can keep pretending this was inevitable. It wasn't.